Hello everyone and welcome to Gutte's online lecture series, A Smart Way of Learning. So you are here with myself, Dr. K.W. Gutte, your course educator. Great to see you here in this video lecture. In semester 5, there is a paper, Literary Theory and Criticism. And in this paper, there is Unit 1, Greek and Roman Masters. This unit has 4 topics: Plato, Aristotle, Horace and Longinus. Today I am going to deal with first topic, that is Plato. Plato, the renowned Greek philosopher, he was born in 427 BC and he was died on 348 BC before Christ. Plato was the most celebrated disciple of Socrates. Under his influence, he began to take active interest in philosophy and politics. After the execution of Socrates in 399 before Christ, Plato abandoned politics. Socrates has challenged many established beliefs and conventions. Socrates challenges the value of literature to society and the nature of literature and function. He had some kind of doubts that whether the literature is useful to society or not. Previous age was considered as the age of creative activity. But 4th century before Christ was an age of critical inquiry and analysis. Plato was not a professed critic of literature, and his critical observations are not consisted in one single book. He has written so many treatise books, including Apology, Ion, Memo, Phaedrus, Catullus, Protagoras, Symposium, a Republic, Laws and Dialogues. Plato was more interested in philosophical investigations, which is the subject of his great work, Dialogues. Dialogues is in form of question and answer by persons like Socrates. This dialogues is in the form of question and answers by some persons like Socrates. Plato represents truth and philosophical views in his writings. Literature, according to Plato, is an art like paintings and sculpture. Plato represents his views about art in his theory of ideas. Plato is famous for his theory of ideas, especially in literary criticism. And what is his theory of ideas? We are going to discuss theory of ideas by Plato. Now, ideas according to Plato are ultimate. Ideas are ultimate reality. And the things based on ideas, things are conceived from ideas, are not the part of reality. For example, he has given example of a tree. A tree is nothing but a concrete embodiment of its image in idea. Tree is not as equal to the idea of tree, and tree is a thing, but the idea of a tree is different, and there may not be equality in the idea of a tree and the actual tree. So idea of anything, is not only tree, but idea of anything is its original pattern, and things are its copy. Things are the copy of ideas. So idea is ultimate reality according to Plato. Copy of anything, copy of idea falls short to the original. It's once removed from reality. Copy of idea is once removed from reality. And art and literature, painting, sculpture, any kind of art, literature, painting or sculpture, produces but thinks mere pastime. Literature is not the real idea, but it is some kind of a copy. Painting is not the real idea, but it is a copy. Sculpture is not the real idea that was there in somebody's mind. But painting or sculpture or literature created by someone is not equal to the idea of someone's mind. First words and next in colors and last in stone. Art is twice removed from reality. It is said that any kind of art, literature, painting or sculpture is like twice removed from reality, because idea is original and the thing, that is literature or painting or sculpture, may be the once removed from reality. And if somebody is copying that object, if somebody is copying that idea and idea is based upon some kind of imagination, but that imagination and that idea is not actual into that thing. Thing is once removed from reality, and literature, painting and sculpture based on a thing is twice removed from reality according to this Plato. Now we'll try to understand theory of ideas in graphics. Now idea according to Plato is ultimate reality. Idea is supposed as an original thing. Idea is image, and that is original and that is ultimate. But a thing, anything, for example tree or anything, is a copy of that idea, and that thing is supposed as once removed from reality is not equal to the idea, is not equal to the original image. That thing is not equal to the ultimate reality, that is idea. So it is, the thing is supposed as a once removed from reality. And literature, painting and sculpture based on some things, based upon the things, is supposed as a twice removed from reality, because idea is original, idea is ultimate, idea is the image, and the thing based on the image is once removed from reality. And art, any kind of art, literature, painting or sculpture based on the thing is supposed as a twice removed from the reality. Things are imperfect of copies of idea from which they spring. So things are supposed as not perfect, because what is perfect? Idea is perfect, and thing is little imperfect than the ideas. So things are imperfect copies of idea from which they spring, and reproduction of things in art must be more imperfect. So reproduction of things in any kind of art, literature, painting or sculpture may be more imperfect, will not be perfect to the things, because thing itself is not perfect. Art takes men away from the reality. Plato thinks that the art which is twice removed from reality will not take to the truth, will not take men to the reality, but it will, this art will take men away from reality according to Plato, rather than it takes towards the reality. So production of art never help to mold the character, and art never promote the well-being of state. So Plato thinks that art is not helpful to build a character, a good character, and the literature and any kind of art is not useful for the well-being of a state, because Plato has discussed so many things about politics and state. So literature or any kind of art, painting, sculpture, is not been promoted by this Plato. Art, literature, painting and sculpture had charm. It has attraction among the people, but it is more dangerous to the individual as well as society. Any literature, any painting, any sculpture has a attraction. It has some kind of artistic element. It has charm. It will attract people to it. But according to Plato, this art is more dangerous to individual as well as society. It is not good for any individual, or this is not good for society according to Plato. Plato had doubt about potential of good about art or literature. He has not confident about the usefulness of literature and art, and he has always having a doubt about potential for good about art and literature. That's why Plato attacks on poetry. What are the grounds? Why he attacks? Why he don't like poetry? Why he is not in the favor of poetry and literature? So this is the main point in this video lecture, because there can be questions. Write a note on Plato's attack on poetry. So we have to think it on. Now what is this Plato's attack on poetry? Why he attacks on poetry? What are the grounds? What are the basis to attack on poetry by Plato? Plato thinks about the good of the individual and state marks Plato's pronouncement on poetry. So whatever the pronouncement of Plato is there in his books is based upon the good of individual and state. Plato condemns poetry than to approve it. He never approves poetry, but he condemns. First ground to condemn poetry was that it was twice removed from reality, as we have already discussed. And second, its inability to get the roots of things. Poetry cannot take us to the roots of the things. So it takes away from the reality to the people. Plato attacks on the following ground. What are the grounds? He attacks on poetry on three grounds. First is poetic inspiration. Second is emotional appeal of poetry. And third is its non-moral character. We'll see one by one. First, he attacks on poetry on the basis of poetic inspiration. Poet writes because of sudden inspiration, something that makes him sing. Any writer, any poet, any author writes because he is inspired by something, and that inspiration is sudden. And according to Plato, the sudden inspiration, sudden impulse may not be right, may not be correct, may not be as good as to have some kind of opinion. So Plato raises a question that can such sudden outpouring of soul be reliable substitute for truth based on reason? Whether it can be substitute for truth. that sudden inspiration, that sudden impulse can be substitute for truth based on the reason. Whether that emotions, whether that inspirations, and whether that impulse may be very close to reality, or it may be based on reason or not. That is the question he wants to ask. The truth in poet's utterance has to be tested on the test of reason. According to Plato, that any kind of truth that is mentioned in the poetry, mentioned in the literature, it has to be tested on the test of reason. This truth may not be reliable. This truth may not be safe guide to the individual as well as any state. And that's why he attacks. So poetry cannot take the place of philosophy. According to Plato, philosophy is higher and poetry cannot take the place of philosophy. Poetry is guided by sudden impulse or inspiration, because poet writes because of sudden inspiration, sudden impulse. So this sudden impulse is not useful to guide anybody, to guide the state. Therefore, poet's utterance cannot be relied upon. Poet's utterance cannot be relied upon to make individual better citizen like philosophy. Philosophy can guide people and can make citizen better. Philosophy can make state better according to Plato, but he doubts on poetry, on literature, and he thinks that poetry cannot make individual better, poetry cannot make state better. Poetry can't help state to be a better organization. If a state has to be better organization, that state shall not be guided by the literature, as Plato thinks. So this was the first ground of Plato's attack on poetry, that is because poetry is inspired by sudden inspiration and that sudden inspiration cannot be a safe guide. Second, the emotional appeal of poetry. Plato's this charge arises from its appeal to the emotions. Poetry is a product of sudden inspiration, so it affects emotions rather than reason, the heart rather than intellect. Because poetry arises from the sudden inspiration, emotions. So emotions may not be as true to the truth. Emotions may not be based on the reasons. So, emotional appeal of poetry, on this basis, he condemns poetry, because poetry is an art. Beauty is added to the original inspiration. Beauty is added to any kind of a literature, painting or sculpture to attract, to have the charm to this thing. And it's pictures of life, characters, scenes, situations overpower emotions, and it holds the reason prisoner. Characters in the literature, scenes in the literature, situations in the literature may overpower emotions, may increase our emotions, and it will hold the reason prisoner. It will hold the reason prisoner. Okay. Will not think by the reason, but will think by the emotions if we rely on the literature. And that's why he never approves to the poetry. So emotions are just impulse, and these emotions can't be safe guide as reason. What is the safe guide? Reason is safe guide, but emotions are, because these are just impulse, these emotions can't be safe guide. For example, the tragic poetry of his age, of the age of Plato. At that time, in the literature, there were weeping and wailing. Everything was indulged like weeping and wailing to the full extent, and it was able to move the hearts of the spectator. Spectators were moved by weeping and wailing. And it is said that if we let our sense of pity grow strong by feeding upon the griefs of others, it is not easy to restrain it our own suffering. If our emotions are if we let our emotions grow strong by seeing the griefs of others, we are not able to restrain, we are not able to stop our own suffering and own emotions. And that's why in Republic, Plato points out adverse effects of emotions. So we have to control our emotions, but with the poetry, people or individuals may not control their emotions by the emotions of the characters weeping and wailing. Poetry fed and watered passions. Instead of drying them up, poetry allowed emotions to rule instead of ruling them as they ought to be ruled. Poetry allows to emotions to rule. We are ruled by the emotions, according to Plato. Instead of that, we should rule the emotions, but emotions are ruling us. So, poetry allow emotions to rule instead of ruling them as they ought to be ruled. And that's why that Plato doesn't approve this poetry. Third point of attack on poetry by Plato is its non-moral character. Plato attacks on poetry because its non-moral character. In the treatment of life, vice and virtues are treated equal. Sometimes vices would be triumphant without moral consideration. In literature, vices and virtues are treated equally, and sometimes more triumphant will be vices and moral consideration. There will not be any kind of a moral consideration, and vices and virtues will not be treated equal. Sometimes vices will be triumphant and virtues will be defeated. For Plato, it was troublesome to see virtue to suffer in literature. Virtue should not be suffered in literature, but at that time, Plato thinks that virtue is suffering in literature. Plato says, many evil characters are happy and many righteous men unhappy. Evil characters should not be happy in literature. The characters which are evil in literature should not be happy, but they are treated that they are happy, and many righteous men are shown as unhappy. Portraits of gods and heroes are objectionably represented at that time. Both are misrepresented in literature. Gods are represented unjust, revengeful, guilty, and with vices. And heroes are represented under the sway of uncontrollable passion, pride, anger, and grief. Such literature in which gods and heroes are misrepresented should not be safeguarded. Such literature can corrupt both citizen and the state. So Plato dislikes poetry and attacks on it. So this is my video lecture. This is the part 1 on Plato. We'll have part 2 on Plato in our next video lecture. In that video lecture, we'll see will deal with the functions of poetry, Plato's comments on drama, effects of impersonation, tragic and comic pleasures, and Plato's observation on style. So thank you for watching this video, Gutte's online lecture series, A Smart Way of Learning. If you like this video, hit the like button. You can share this video with other students, and you can subscribe this YouTube channel to get connected with me. Thank you very much.